This episode of Dispatches from Planet Albany is brought to you with support by New York State United Teachers, which represents more than 600,000 educators and school-related professionals in New York. Dispatches is also supported by the public affairs firm O'Donnell & Associates. For more information, check out o'donnellsolutions.com.
Two of the agencies to my left, where I'm pointing for those listening, down Holland Avenue to 44 Holland, where the office is.
How do you know where that is in the geography of this room? I feel like I've been turned around 8,000 times. I call bullshit on this. You're confident that Holland Avenue is that way?
I will, and I'll take wagers.
I'm
to
also
support
confident that Holland Ave is that way.
Okay,
I couldn't tell you where I am. We could be in another city right now. I feel so lost.
Yeah, and that's okay. That's why we're here. We're here to help.
I've also declared war on potholes, so here's the first shot across the bow.
Well, as you know, with Planet Albany, there's always something that makes the planet turn.
And it's this amazing view of D.C., and Eddie Vedder comes out. And he goes, "You have a cigarette?" And I've never smoked in my life, but if I had, I wish that was the moment.
And this strategy takes us from potholes to knotholes.
I would like to say it was a pleasure, Mr. Kim. But I'm on the road.
I'm David Lombardo, and this is Dispatches from Planet Albany, a WCNY podcast about power and politics that is recording live in front of a bunch of rowdy students right now from the Albany Law Government Law Center. That's 2 times law. I'm joined by my Capitol colleague Dan Clark, author of the Capitol Confidential newsletter, and Patrick Wilds, a former assistant secretary in the Hochul administration who is now director of the Government Law Center. So Patrick, I want to start with you, and I sort of referenced this before we started recording, how you had such an important job in the past. Do the people in this room realize what a big deal you used to be, or do they think you're just some, I don't know, professor?
I'm going to give the very legal answer, which is it depends on each individual person.
So as you look around this room,
I think that the folks here, and I would say we have a very good group of students here today, are particularly keyed into what we're doing here and understand the importance of working in government. So I think they have hopefully a pretty good sense, but I'm not seeing any nods or shaking of the head. So I think I'm on the right track here in terms of helping prepare them for careers in government.
Well, how about you, Dan? The idea of like DepSex is not something that was always front of mind for me. I think about my
I don't know what you just said. What did you just say?
Yeah, Patrick?
You want me to explain the hierarchical titles?
Oh, deputy secretaries.
There you go.
Okay.
I mean, was that
Continue.
always something you knew about? Because it was not something that was always on my radar.
No, because you have deputy secretaries, but then you have the leaders of the state agencies, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you don't think of the deputy secretaries so much as the key person on that, but it turns out a lot of the time that they actually are.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, who knew it wasn't necessarily the people at the agencies who had the big title of like commissioner that were necessarily in charge, and that they had someone who they reported to who wasn't necessarily just the governor. I mean, is that a fair way to describe things, or would you say that the commissioners had more authority?
I think it really depends. I think it depends on portfolios. And again, we start using these terms. I already used another one. So portfolios, typically the way the governor's office has been structured since I worked there, which is under 2 governors, was that there were about 10 or 12 different major subject matter portfolios. The one I was in was human services and mental hygiene. That includes big agencies like the Office of Mental Health, Office of Children and Family Services.
The O's.
All the O agencies, but not all of them. There were 3 or 4 very important staff positions in the governor's office that oversaw each of those portfolios, and kind of reporting up to them was the commissioner of every agency, and then by extension, everyone that worked for the commissioner. So in some cases, there's agencies that have 50 staff members, and that's one type of hierarchical structure. But you talk about like the Office of Mental Health, Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, there's across the state probably a combined 30 to 35,000 employees for those 2 agencies. But the role I was in before was really overseeing the work of all of those people, and the commissioners and their senior teams were reporting up to us. And that you can kind of carry that scheme across all of the executive branch of government, and that's how you have all these assistant secretaries reporting to deputy secretaries, reporting to the director of state operations, who reports really to the governor. That's the structure of the executive branch.
What commissioner was least likely to take your gruff or guff, whatever the word is, back in the day? Who would you be like kind of on pins and needles about having to tell them no or direct them to do something?
Honestly, we had pretty good relationships with all of them.
Okay,
but
which was the worst?
The worst?
Yeah.
I don't know if there was the
who
worst.
were you anxious about?
Never anxious. I'd say whoever was getting the most funding and support from us were generally the easiest to work with.
Well,
right? Which isn't surprising. So if you follow the numbers back a couple of years, I would say the Office of Mental Health I worked the most closely with in the last 3 years because the governor's invested sizably in the mental health system. I'd say the Office of Addiction Services and Supports have been navigating a overdose crisis and what seems like the beginning of maybe a problem gambling crisis. So I'd say that the conversations with them were on average a little bit harder just because of what they were going through. And they also had this really important task, unenviable task maybe in some instances, of managing the opioid settlement funds that the states received from many different types of litigation against opioid manufacturers. So I would say the relationship with Oasis was sometimes a harder one to navigate just because they were going through so much as an agency.
So you didn't have to tell like Dr. Cunningham, who was the head of Oasis, hey, let's ixnay on the old overdose prevention centers all the time, or she knew not to run with that?
I don't know if she knew not to run with it so much as that I think that there were ongoing discussions like in private about what we thought of things and then also what we were going to say publicly about them.
So you mentioned gambling, and so that leads me into our game for today, which is this stock market type thing we're going to do right now. We're basically, what are we buying low on? What are we selling high on? And I asked you guys to identify a couple things, some areas where you think they're moving up, they're moving down. This could be people, this could be issues. Maybe you've got something else in mind. I've got a whole list I can start with. Is there anything that you two feel passionately about? Dan, you haven't talked in a while.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Would you like some oxygen?
You know
so
what
you
I'm
can go for it?
passionate about.
I mean, a lot of things, but what do you have for today?
I'm selling affordability.
Okay, the A word. Why?
It's just this year they tried so hard to make it seem like they were serious about providing affordability to New Yorkers, and they just didn't do it. And I think that it's going to be the same thing next year. They're going to try to, ironically, sell this message of affordability, but not actually take any tangible steps to get there. And I'm talking about people's health bills, people's utility bills, things that the state can regulate, but decides not to on a broader scale, in part because of campaign donations, in other parts because they don't really know what to do and they don't know what's happening. There's this crisis in the Hudson Valley of several healthcare institutions being bought up by one healthcare company. What that does is gives them a lot more power leveraging rates with insurers. So they get more money in the end. And that's something that nobody's acknowledged.
So to hammer this point home, raise your hands, because you obviously don't have mics, whether you feel in some way, shape, or form the state government has done something to make your life more affordable in the last year. Anybody have any hands? Any hands going up? We got a kind of a shrug and we got a handshake, but no actual hand raising, which seems to go and enforce your point, Dan. This is not exactly taking off like a rocket ship.
I'm a man of the people.
How about you, Patrick? What are you buying? What are you selling?
I actually did a lot of thinking about this over the weekend.
I would hope you took this seriously.
No,
I clearly did.
I did.
Got here on time, ready to go with all my own equipment and everything. Can't prove that.
Do you want to go on the record with what time you got here today?
Well, what time did the alarm stop
You can take my answer from earlier.
What time did the alarm stop?
You can say it depends. It's a legal answer.
So what were you going to say about
here.
all your preparation?
Well,
Patrick?
I was tracking, I think a lot of my thoughts here are going to be human services system oriented based on a lot of what my focus has been. I think an interesting potential buy, and I am mindful of the fiscal forecasting for the state, is a treatment court expansion in the coming budget cycle.
This is such an insular choice. Okay, you're going to have to explain
I'm going to
what
get
that
to
is,
it. And
too.
it gets broader, I think, as well. So our folks, and I'm going to again do like the nods or the shakes of the heads. Is anyone familiar with what treatment courts are in general?
Some nods, but this could just be a room full of goody two
No,
shoes
they're all
and not representative.
They're all nods, subtle, but they're all nods.
Yeah.
So
which one would have the guts to actually stand up and tell us what it is, though? That's what I really want to know.
And that's why this isn't a class, because if it was a class, then it could do some cold calling.
Touché.
It could be fun. Yeah, it could be fun. Maybe next time. So on the Friday, not this past Friday, the Friday before, it was World Mental Health Day. So what happened down in New York City that day is there was a pretty decent hearing that the state Senate put on regarding the Treatment Court Expansion Act. Now, this has been this legislative effort for a couple of years now to what it was known as Treatment Not Jails Act was the prior iteration. It's been amended a little bit, so the new term now is the Treatment Court Expansion Act. What I found unique about that was not that the same advocacy groups who feel that this is a really positive thing, and again, these are courts that if someone is brought in on criminal charges but may have, additional issues at play, namely mental illness, namely substance use disorder, disorder, that they could be, instead of navigating the traditional criminal justice system, they would be diverted towards services, and that, assuming that works, maybe their criminal charges would be mitigated or actually resolved. So it's a pretty big shift for the way the criminal justice system would work. Currently, there's about 350 treatment courts in the state. The idea would be to expand it a lot more than that. Historically, you have the same old, albeit important, advocacy groups that will come out in support of this. Not usually a lot of folks that are absolutely against it, because it's generally a pretty good idea, I would say. But you don't have people like the actual sitting chief judge of the State Court of Appeals showing up at the hearing to testify. So I think that is a notable shift in terms of the seriousness that OCA, as a third branch of government, is taking on this issue. One thing that's interesting about what he said in that in his remarks there was that a big part of the expense of this would actually come from investing in the human services workforce. Which brings me to another point.
Yeah.
Every year, and I know Dan is familiar with this, but we have this discussion of the COLA, the cost of living adjustment, the idea of investing in the human services workforce in every budget. Under the last governor, there weren't really many investments at all. There have been measured investments under Governor Hochul in this space. So I think that if we're going to see movement on the treatment court side, it's actually going to require major investment in the provider system, which is going to mean probably another COLA, if not then some. So I'm buying the idea that if those two can actually get merged together, that there might be an actual substantive movement in that direction. And the last thing I'll say before I hand the mic over is you're looking at a federal government who is cutting services in this space pretty comprehensively. So the state, I think, is going to be in a position where they're going to need to buttress the human services system in a year where, federal funding cuts are going to be hurting a lot of nonprofit providers.
And it's tough because the governor's already told agencies that they're not going to get any more funding than they did last year.
Right.
But at the same time, that really represents cuts to agencies because costs go up. So if you have a flat line of spending, then you have to cut something to keep that spending
it's effectively
flat.
a cut.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't understand why you're buying this, because you talked about investment, and as Dan just said, this is not a year of excess funding at the state level to invest in additional things. So who is championing this, who hasn't championed it in the past, aside from the judge, who is not part of the budget process, that's actually going to get this across the finish line? What actually makes you want to buy this, other than wishful thinking and the idea that maybe this is the right policy?
I think it's if and maybe I should have prefaced it with this. I think if the folks that are pushing for the strict investment can partner with the folks who are actually looking for the court expansion, that there might actually be a glimmer of hope there to actually get this across the finish line. But I'm not sitting here saying that it's a slam dunk buy. It's
you haven't
a
invested
hopeful buy.
your entire retirement funds into this account, is what you're saying.
Sure.
So you mentioned the COLA, and I just want to follow up on a debate we were having in the press room, which is they're asking for, I think, 2.7% because they go, that's what the actual cost of living is, so that's what we want. From a bargaining position, my point is that they should ask for a 20% raise, and then the governor says 0, and they say, great, let's meet in the middle, 10%. And they said something about, we want to be reasonable, we don't want to be laughed out of the room.
That's what happened last year.
Yeah, well, what do you think, Patrick? How do you think these numbers are viewed when they're bandied about?
I mean, I think it's a year-to-year analysis. I don't think that the strategy from a couple of years ago. Also, remember that I believe the first year that the governor was in office is the biggest COLA we've seen, which was a 5.4% increase.
Well, we were
pretty
rich
sizable.
with funds
Sure,
that year.
sure.
The federal
but
government
I think,
had made it rain on us.
I do think that a lot of, and maybe not all, but a lot of the advocates and the stakeholders that are in that space are trying to be reasonable, but they're also looking at the fact that they're getting slashed left and right when it comes to federal funding. So I think that they're saying if we come in with what feels like a more modest number, and we can actually say data-wise it's tied to the CPI, then we actually have something to lean back on. Because otherwise 2.7 seems arbitrary, right? Like, why is it that instead of 3 if you want to land on a 2.7? So I do think they're using the 2.7 as a fulcrum because they can probably actually tie it to that as a data point, but that they're trying to be reasonable. I also think that, maybe the legislature is generally going to come in, if we look at the last 3 or 4 years, they're going to come in at what the advocates are asking for. It's a matter of whether the executive starts at 0 or they offer something modest.
For more than 100 years, the New York State Association of Counties has served as the united voice of New York's county leaders, fostering excellence in county government and advocating for sustainable funding and sensible legislation that protects local taxpayers and the essential services they rely on. Learn more at nysac.org. So, because we're in a law setting, my buy and sell has to do with the Senate Judiciary Committee. And right now it's chaired by Brad Hoylman-Siegel, who's a senator you probably have never heard of unless you worked at State Watch. And he is leaving at the end of the year because he's going to get elected Manhattan Borough President, which is going to create a vacancy in the Judiciary Committee.
Who do you think it's going to be?
So I am buying Andrew Gounardes, who's another senator you've never heard of. He's a Brooklyn Democrat who is a lawyer, and I think he's going to be the next judiciary chair because we've seen some movement around the committee process this year already with Jamal Bailey, who's a lawyer, moving over to insurance. I don't think he's going to want to give that up after 1 year. We saw Zellner Myrie go from elections to codes, which is another committee that could be a jumping off point to judiciary, but I think he's going to want to focus on that criminal justice space right now. And I think as a 2018 baby, Andrew Gounardes now actually has enough seniority for a position like that. People who have more seniority, and seniority matters because that's how committees are primarily awarded in the legislature, but there's also some personality to it as well. So if people really hate you, your seniority can only go so far. But so somebody like Brian Kavanaugh is also a lawyer. I was surprised to learn. So were some of his colleagues when I was asking about this.
I'm actually surprised to learn right now.
But I don't think he's going to leave housing. It's kind of his baby. It's what he's known for. Somebody like Luis Sepulveda has more seniority than Andrew Gounardes, but I don't think he's necessarily beloved amongst his colleagues. So I am buying Andrew Gounardes stock right now as the future judiciary chair. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I think that's a good pick.
Yeah.
I think that Gounardes would be good. I think another good pick would be Shelley Mayer.
Would she want to leave education?
I think so.
And she's been there. She has, sticking with seniority, more seniority than Gounardes by I think a year.
Yeah, and I don't really know necessarily if she was looking for the education committee when it was assigned to her. And in terms of the policy that she's done in the past year, it's been a lot of energy policy, energy cost policy, not so much.
Throw out the PSC.
Yeah, basically that. Yeah, that has nothing to do with judiciary, but I can just tell something from her. She's very interested in courts.
She was counsel for the Senate Democrats a million years ago when she was a staffer. And if she was to leave education, that would create a game of musical chairs that I'm not prepared to discuss. But I think people would want that. People would want to move and mosey around. And
oh, yeah.
Patrick, the machinations of the legislature, does this sound like a foreign language to you coming from the executive branch, or do you eat and breathe this stuff as well?
I'd say probably somewhere in between. I've learned a lot since I've been here, and I've been in a position where I can speak more freely with the legislature, if I'm being entirely candid.
All right. Any other stock tips that you guys have for the kids today?
Oh, geez, there's so many. Redistricting I would buy.
Yeah? And
for sure.
What does that mean in this context?
Redistricting in terms of redrawing New York's districts in a response to Texas redrawing its districts.
So you're saying you think they will pass an amendment in 26?
I think that's really likely. I mean, we talked about it obsessively for a month. If it doesn't happen now, then I'm going to be really, honestly, mad that we spent so much time talking about it.
So buying, and I can understand that because even though that issue has cooled right now, it's not something that the governor is constantly preaching. Once some of these other states actually take actions in 26, once their new lines are in place, I think there will be renewed pressure on Democrats to take that action. Because if there wasn't that pressure, I might be willing to start selling that because it does fall off the radar. And these lawmakers are kind of like kids. If it's not front and center for them, it's like, well, out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, and I think as 26 comes and it's an election year, I think more people running for Congress in particular in New York, especially in really close districts, might be the ones pushing and saying, we got to redraw these lines in a few years.
Well, Michael Asher down in the NY12, Manhattan Assembly member who is going to be running for Congress and is going to be making a big deal about this. I mean, he is carrying one of the redistricting bills. And hard to imagine he doesn't make that a big issue for his campaign. Patrick, any other stock tips for the kids?
Oh, I wanted to throw it to you both, the idea of universal child care, because, we've been seeing, right, the governor maybe in some instances be very strategic about where she's going to appear publicly with the likely next mayor of New York City. But one thing that they seem to have in common conceptually, maybe how they get there looks very different, is this idea of universal child care. I will say myself, $1,900 a month, it's a lot. I could use some help, but I think that there's a lot of folks in New York State that feel the same. So
selling it.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, I'm not even saying next year. I'm saying maybe next couple of years.
The governor's big response to this issue in 2025 was to put $1 million aside for a study which, according to the people I talked to in the last week, has not even begun. So this is some hair on fire issue, and you've got $1 million appropriated back in May. Hey, we're 5 months later, and we've made no progress on it except to begin maybe playing footsie with CUNY, begin maybe calling up Bob Megda and say, hey, you free this year, Bob? Could you do a study for us? Because you're our go-to guy. So I am selling.
I would like to circle back to my original comments about affordability and say that is, again, something that they don't really have a solution for. I mean, there are so many different paths, right? It's come from expanding subsidies in the past few years, allocating money for infrastructure so they can build more childcare facilities. But like childcare is one of those things that is not really if you build it, they will come, because in a lot of instances, it makes more sense for one parent to stay home and not work. So you don't know either way. A lot of people have called for a system, a total restructuring that looks like the public school system. And maybe that's not such a bad idea, but I don't think that happens anytime soon.
Well, this governor is basically synonymous with incremental change. So the idea that they would ever blow something up like that is laughable.
Right.
Any other questions you have for us,
No,
Patrick?
I'll just bring that disappointing news home to my wife tonight, but otherwise, no, nothing else.
Jessica Ramos, state senator from Queens. Are you guys buying or selling her? She's going to face a primary challenge next year. She had a very unsuccessful, is probably the charitable way to describe her state Senate campaign. And the future definitely doesn't look bright for her, but maybe there's a case to be made that you should be buying her. She started as an upstart in 2018, knocking out an incumbent Democrat in a primary. Dan, what are you thinking? Buying, selling, holding?
I would be selling Jessica Ramos. Her endorsement of the former governor has really burned her with a lot of people. In Queens especially, I mean, Democrats there, I don't know if they're going to be backing her over Jessica Gonzalez Rojas for that reason. Queens is very quickly becoming a very progressive bureau in some parts of it.
Yeah, some parts.
Yeah, some parts of it. And Jessica Ramos has good labor connections, but it was interesting to see that her endorsement did not really influence those labor parties, not political parties, but labor entities to go for Andrew Cuomo. It didn't give him a big boost like how I think that she was hoping it was going to.
And no Latino support moved with her endorsement.
Right, exactly. I think at the end of the day, I don't know if it was that Jessica Ramos was tired of being in the legislature.
She definitely is. That's what we hear, is that she's kind of sick of it.
Right. I mean, regardless of whether Andrew Cuomo had won the primary or not, endorsing him burns her with everybody in the legislature. I mean, you can't turn back time and pretend like all of them didn't call for him to resign and all of them didn't say that he did terrible things. Well, she can.
I think it burns bridges in terms of her identity, because she was this progressive champion.
Right.
If you're somebody like David Weprin, who is a moderate to conservative Democrat, endorsing Andrew Cuomo is no problem.
Oh, no, it doesn't matter for him. No. I mean, there are some Democrats where I think they fly so under the radar in general of just like existing in the legislature that endorsing Andrew Cuomo doesn't affect them at all, really, unless they face a competitive primary, which is a possibility in some of these races. But we're not seeing a huge appetite for that from the DSA folks so far.
So I mentioned before we really got going that you have that experience at the Justice Center. And the Justice Center is at a period of transition right now. Their interim leader has been in place for about a year. They were not one of the people who was tapped by the governor to serve in a permanent capacity this spring. I can't get them to come on my show anymore because of issues with HALT. Are you buying, selling, or holding the Justice Center right now?
That's a good question. Buying.
Because
abuse and neglect doesn't stop regardless of who's running a state agency. So I think
they'll always have business to do, I guess.
Are you buying or selling leadership of, or just kind of the agency as a whole?
This is sort of a Freudian sort of thing. This is like an ink blot test, and you kind of do whatever you see.
No,
Patrick.
I appreciate that. Well, I just guest taught a lecture on the Justice Center last week. So I think it's an incredibly important agency. I think that they've come a very long way from As Your Own reporting, circa 2 summers ago. The series that you did, which I thought was very well done on the Justice Center, noted that when the agency first came online in the summer of 2013, they had much more of a kind of police feeling vibe to their investigative process. I think they've come a very long way under the most recent executive director, Denise Miranda. From all that I've seen, they continue to head in that direction in terms of having better relationships with the unions, being less kind of predatory feeling on the provider side and more really trying to make sure that people are safe in the state. So I can continue to buy them, but I'm sorry they're not coming on your show.
But selling leadership?
No, not necessarily.
No? You think they're going to be here for a long, long time?
I don't have a sense on that, but they seem okay. I don't.
You don't read too much from the tea leaves that their agency head was one of the few actings to not get a permanent appointment?
I don't know where that's headed, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I would be willing to dish if I had it. I just don't have it.
Well, we pretty much are out of time now, so unless you guys have any other tips that are just burning a hole in your pocket, I think we've got to wrap it up.
No.
Okay.
Can I just say thank you?
Please.
Thank you to both of you for coming to the law school and helping our students see firsthand what good reporting can look like and exposing this.
This shouldn't count as good reporting. This is just us shooting the shit.
No. I think it's helpful for them to get a sense how personalities work.
And shooting from the hip.
Oh yeah. Well, I think it's helpful for them to see it firsthand. So thank you both for coming in.
Can I say thank you?
Sure.
I don't know to who.
No, that's fine. Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying it. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that.
Well, we've been speaking with Dan Clark. He's the author of the Capital Confidential newsletter. And we've also been hearing from Patrick Wilds, who's now director of the Government Law Center at Albany Law.
You got it.
Thank you so much. Let's hear it for the guests.
In my mid-30s here, I was working with people.
You look great.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
If you spent more time in the Cuomo administration, I think it would have aged you more.
I know. That's right.